So the European Union has agreed to push back the Brexit deadline until January 31st of 2020. But how did we get here? On the 2nd of October 2016, the then Prime Minister Theresa May announced that she intended to invoke Article 50 by the end of March 2017, which basically means that the UK would start its plan to leave the EU by the end of March 2019. Now, what is Article 50? Well, according to Brexit Brief, Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty is the only mechanism for a member state of the European Union to leave by going through a series of steps to withdraw the country in question from its treaty obligations. The process of leaving the EU was started by a referendum held in June 2016, where 52% of the votes were in favor of the UK leaving the EU. A lot of things are still unsure about Brexit. Quite frankly, it still remains a possibility that Brexit may be reversed, since many liberals are adamantly pushing against it and a no-deal Brexit still looms. Nevertheless, we should anticipate the possible effect of a Brexit on the region. Hi, my name is Samuel, and today I present to you 7 impacts of Brexit on the European Union. With the third largest population in the EU, a GDP of 2.8 trillion, second only to Germany, and being again the second highest net contributor to the European Union budget, the UK's departures from the EU will cause some social, economic, and political change in the years following Brexit. Number 1. The EU budget. The UK is one of the net contributors to the EU budget, which means it contributes to more money to the EU budget than it gets back from it. Many supporters of Brexit believe that the government would be able to allow tax cuts if it no longer has to pay a net contribution. Without the UK's contribution, the EU budget will have to be reduced, or else the burden may fall on the top contributors such as Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands, who are also net contributors themselves. Number 2. Economic impact.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Even if there is a no deal, the EU still wants Britain to pay a Brexit divorce bill that is rumored to be around 33 billion sterling pounds. The divorce bill, which is basically a sum of money owed to the EU by the UK as a settlement, must be paid when the UK officially leaves the Union. After the Brexit referendum, many companies have relocated their business operations or part of it to other parts of Europe. Out of those places they chose, 30% moved to Dublin, 18% to Luxembourg, 12% to Frankfurt, 12% to Paris, and 10% to Amsterdam. According to Rand.org, the economic analysis shows that the UK will be economically worse off outside of the EU under most plausible scenarios. The better question yet is, how much worse off will the UK be post-Brexit? The failure of the UK to achieve an open trading and investment with the EU post-Brexit would have negative implications for the UK and the EU. The option of leaving the EU with no deal and simply applying World Trade Organization rules would lead to the greatest economic losses for the UK. The analysis of this particular scenario shows that trading under the World Trade Organization rules would reduce future GDP by around 5% 10 years after Brexit, or $140 billion compared with EU membership. Of all the scenarios analyzed, the one that would have the most benefit would be a trilateral UK-EU-US agreement, essentially a transatlantic trade and investment partnership-like agreement, TTIP for short. The UK would be 7.1 percentage points of GDP better than the World Trade Organization rules scenario, which is even slightly better than the continued EU membership would be. This is because the UK would gain preferential access to both the US and the EU marketplaces and benefit from their stronger economic growth attributed to a TTIP. However, a TTIP-like arrangement is seen as very unlikely in the current political environment. Number 3. Migration. Out of the influx of migration coming from other member states of the EU, East Europeans have the highest numbers combined. As of 2016, 1.6 million workers in this group migrated to the UK. The largest groups were from Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. Migration is one of the leading causes for Brexit. Even before the referendum, Europe was struggling to control its influx of asylum seekers from the Middle East. The UK, on the other hand, because of its geographical location, was technically not part of the Schengen zone and was more difficult to reach. The UK saw one of the lowest asylum applications, and yet Britain has been one of the most vocal in Europe when it comes to opposing the acceptance of refugees. Up to 70% of UK citizens in 2016 disapproved of how the EU was dealing with the refugee crisis. With Brexit, the UK do not want to close its borders to migrants, but want to follow similar immigration policies in countries like Canada by favoring migrants with a certain level of education, age, job experiences, etc. While under the EU, it cannot refuse entry to undesired migrants from the other member states because of the freedom of movement for workers, which is an integral part of EU policy. Number 4. Public sentiment. The UK has seen a resurgence of EU-based support, with polls showing that in September 2018, more UK residents thought Brexit would be wrong rather than the original August 2016 polling data that showed more support for Brexit rather than remaining. Also, Euroscepticism across Europe has also increased. This might have to do with the increasing support of the right-wing politicians of certain member states. Number 5. Languages. If the UK leaves the EU, English can no longer retain its status as one of the Union's official or working languages. Well, this is gonna be a bit problematic. In European schools, 97% of children learn English as an additional language, compared with 34% learning French and 23% learning German. French was once the dominant language in the region, but English, over the years, slowly surpassed it. In 2015, it was estimated that 80% of legislative proposals were drafted first in English. English is heavily relied upon and would take a considerable amount of time to adapt to another language as the main language of the region. Other countries have already begun to push their language in the forefront. Members of the German Federal Parliament have called on staff and the EU institutions to use German more often. French President Emmanuel Macron said in 2018 that he vowed to fight for a wider use of French in the EU institutions and abroad. Number 6. Expensive goods. In the case of a no-deal Brexit, importing goods from the EU may get more expensive and vice versa. The EU is a major trading partner to the UK. As a state member, UK firms don't have to pay extra duties, taxes or customs checks on goods traveling to or from the EU. But after a no-deal Brexit, new rules will apply. Number 7. EU citizens need to apply for settled status. The UK government has reached an agreement with the EU that will protect the right of EU citizens and their family members living in the UK. Those without the settled status or simply haven't applied before 2021 could face deportation. And there you have it, folks, 7 impacts of Brexit on the European Union. Let me know in the comment section below which points you agreed or disagreed with. We post on Mondays and Fridays. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so that you won't miss any of our future interesting videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.